Hello, we have Jules Kortenhorst here, CEO of the Rocky Mountain Institute, based in the US here and focused on clean energy. Um, Jules, thanks for attending and participating in our conference. There's been a lot more focus this year, I think in the past, on renewables and clean energy at the forum. And I wonder what you think that signifies in terms of where things are moving with the oil and gas industry and the energy transition.
Thank you, Mark, and a pleasure to be here. I think the increased focus on renewables, clean energy, the energy transition, really is based on two major trends. On the one hand, we see that governments around the world have come to grips with the urgency of the climate crisis and are recognizing, maybe even more now during the pandemic, that Mother Nature is not messing around. She is telling us, the physics, the science, the chemistry is telling us that we have to address the issue of climate change very urgently. And that is pushing governments to lead on policy with regards to the energy transition. Now you may say, I see that in China with the bold announcement of net zero by 2060. I see that in Europe with the Green Deal, but I'm not sure that I see that in the United States. And that may be true in Washington, D.C., but even here in the US, in state after state, in city after city, businesses, investors, private sector is leading on the transition to a low carbon future. The second driver that I think is pushing us in this direction is the fact that the technologies are just becoming superior. The technologies are just becoming more cost effective. Pretty much around the world, we are now seeing that to generate more electricity, wind and solar are more cost effective solutions. We are starting to see that electric cars are becoming the better answer and soon will be the cheaper answer. So around the world, we're seeing that the technologies are ready for showtime and that they have the wind of policy in their sails.
Great. And so looking back at the US then, where we're based, where do you see, what do you see the US's role in this energy transition being, and especially in reducing global climate change? And how do you see the US getting there from either a policy and or a market and industry perspective?
That's a very valid and important question, particularly at this moment just ahead of federal elections coming up in a couple of weeks. So the United States is, as a country, one of the highest emitters per capita of greenhouse gas. And although the US has seen a reduction in emissions per head of the population, it still emits more than almost any other country in the world. That means that the US has a task ahead of itself to reduce its emissions and be compliant with the goals set out in the Paris Agreement. Clearly, if this president gets reelected, that is not in the cards from a federal policy perspective. But if the administration switches to democratic control, then it is quite likely that the pace and the ambition of climate policy will dramatically scale, and that the US will start leading in the decarbonization of the global economy. And that is also a great business opportunity, because too often people continue to think about that transition as something difficult and something painful. And yes, there are changes that need to be made, and not every one of those changes is easy. But it is also going to create massive business opportunities, significant improvements in the cost of energy, reductions in the cost of energy over time, and therefore critical to the competitiveness of nations. So I think a lot will depend on what happens in the November election, but the United States certainly is positioned to regain its leadership in driving the energy technologies of the future.
Okay, and where does the cost factor come into that? There's a lot of talk about, in the U.S. particularly, wind and solar need to reach some sort of cost parity in order to start edging out gas-fired generation in particular. What's the timeline, do you think, for that?
Yeah, it's important to get our facts straight here. Already today, all across the country, new wind power, new solar plants are more cost effective than existing coal plants. So already today, we can replace all of our coal-fired power generation with new power generation based on wind and solar and be more cost effective. With regards to gas, that's not yet completely true in every place. But even with gas power generation, we're seeing that new gas plants are outcompeted by wind and solar. And over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, we'll see the cost of wind and solar and battery storage drop even more, such that these clean energy portfolios will be able to outcompete the existing fleet of gas power generation. And then people immediately ask, but the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. Can we actually run an electricity system on very high penetration of renewables? And research has shown over and over again, practice in Europe has shown over and over again, that high penetration renewables, 60, 70, even 80% is possible completely on the basis of the current technologies. And that remaining 15 to 20%, where we may need some additional technological solutions, the innovation is happening at a fast enough pace that we can be confident that by 2035, as Biden has set the ambition, we can have a fully decarbonized power sector on the basis of the technologies that currently exist or are in the pipeline.
Great, Jules. Thanks for your insight.
You're very welcome. Nice talking to you, Mark.
Thank you.